Hi everyone, this is Nathan from Snap and welcome to another of our Snap XMP webinars. Today we're going to be looking at creating reports. Before we begin, I should add that there are some intricate steps involved in creating these smart reports, so you may wish to make use of the recording of this webinar, which will be available on our website over the next few days. Having said that there are some intricate steps and also adding that it's not a quick fix, it is very much worth investing in and persevering with, as smart reporting can save you an awful lot of time in the long run. This is the first part of two smart reporting webinars. Today we're going to be looking at taking your previously created tables, charts, lists and clouds and adding them to a report which you can run off at any time of day or night. We'll be using text grids alongside images to draw out your key data. In the second part, which will be in the new year, we'll be looking at making your reports more dynamic with smart commentary alongside some other dynamic content. But today we're going to start simple and build from there. In terms of general structure, we start off by building the tables and charts that you wish to include in your report. Depending upon your required content, this will invariably involve creating some derived variables, allowing you to simplify your analysis for the end user. We then build those reports using tables and charts, adding them into your report, layering them as you go, and potentially adding some commentary in between. And then once set up, your reports are ready to run any time of day or night and will always include the latest data. A few key benefits in terms of creating your reports in Snap. First off, you can create your analysis and reporting before your survey's gone live or before your project's gone live. So if you have got a survey running for 3 months, you can spend that time creating your reports rather than panicking on day 30 or day 90 and realizing that you've only got a couple of days to get things sorted. Your tables, charts, lists and reports are all updated in real time. So if you run a report at 3 a.m. and someone completes your survey at 2:55 a.m, their data will be included in your report. And to confirm, your reports can be run at the end of a project or continually throughout the project. With smart reporting, we can add dynamic content and commentary to your automated reports, giving them that personal handwritten feel. And another great reason for creating your reports in Snap is the ability to have one single report which can be used to mass produce multiple bespoke reports based upon areas, demographics, departments, teams, or any other aspect that you need reporting on. So for example, if you needed to create an individual report for each department in your company, you would actually just create one report in Snap, and that report might then generate 7 bespoke reports, all tailored to the individual departments. Okay, let's head into the software to make a start. I'm going to be using a survey which you may be familiar with if you've been listening in on any of our webinars recently. It's about attendees at a conference and contains a range of different types of questions. I'll do a very quick preview just to show you which questions are in the survey. So we have a number of sort of yes/no type questions with routing in them. We've got some multiple response map controls and satisfaction type questions. I'd imagine most of your surveys have some kind of rating scale question in them. We've got some multiple response questions where they can choose as many options as they wish. Some number of response questions, general comments, and there's also we're asking for 3 different sort of one-word answers, sort of phrases, which might give your experience of the conference today. So a little bit of everything. And when we turn in terms of actually running the reports, today we're going to be focusing on running the different reports based upon this question, which I've actually named as venue in the survey. But we'll close that one down and go back into the survey itself. Now, If I go into my reports icon, so in fact I'll close down the questionnaire design window, and if we head into our reports icon, I've got a report which I've already started. So I'm going to go straight ahead and just press the play button on that one just so you can see what the report looks like. Preview. So page 1 looks a little bit like a dashboard or perhaps a poster. Zoom in a little bit. The main satisfaction question is at the top. In the middle, I've drawn out some key bits of information alongside some images. And then down the bottom, we have some sort of trend analysis looking at data over the last 12 years. Or 2 years, in fact, not 12 years. Moving on to page 2, we're then looking at some more detailed information presenting. Here we've got the top 5 facilities used for those people that have never visited before, and then equally the top 5 for those who have been before. And then down the bottom, we've got a word cloud based on those 3 words that I pointed out earlier. And then moving on to the last page, we've got a list of general comments. If I close that one down, we can then look to see how that report was actually built. In fact, if I do just move on to one more page side, you'll see that it then takes me on to the second venue, which is Manchester. I'll keep going through. You can see it then goes on to Cardiff. So this report is actually repeated 4 times, 1 for each of those venues. And obviously it's not just the wording that's changing, it's the date as well. So we've got 51% there. Move on to the next one. You can see it's now 63% for Glasgow. But if I close that one down, if I was to run the report once more, in fact, if I double click on the report initially, you can see that the report is actually made up of a number of different instructions. And if I press play this time from within the report, and this time I'm going to tick the box which says print report items and preview this one. You can actually see next to each of the items on the page there's a little reference number, and that gives a bit more indication of how the report was built. So it was built using those different items on the page, which we'll look at in just a second. Now I've actually got a PDF of this already sat on my desktop, so I'm going to close down this preview and go and view that on my desktop instead. My PowerPoint. So I've got exactly the same report, I said, with those reference numbers on. Okay, now moving back to the report in Snap. And starting at the top, you can see we've got all these instructions, and my report starts off with a page layout. And if I double click on that one, this is where we can specify that we want the report to be sort of portrait or landscape, how many columns it's going to be, potentially what margins we've got, so the sort of space around the edge of the page. Obviously, in your case, when you go and build a new report, this won't be here waiting for you. So it's a case of clicking the single plus. Within this list, you can see there's a page layout, and you obviously just set whatever settings you wish. But I'm going to cancel out of that one today. Below number 1, we have a tailor setting. So just like a table and chart, your reports have tailor settings as well. So this is where do we want the report to include your no replies, potentially decimal places? Will the report include things like the notes that perhaps attached to your tables and charts? So they've got various settings you can set as default for this report. It is worth mentioning though that all our tables and charts, they've also got their own individual tailor settings. So although you might set some settings at the top, they may well then be overwritten by the individual tailor settings for each table and chart. Item number 3 is a text grid. Now, if I move back into my report, to the PDF, so you can see this is item number 3 at the top, which is basically my header for the whole report. So if I go back in and look at number 3, it's a text grid. Now a text grid is essentially, if I click on the plus and create a new one, essentially an empty table with a certain number of rows and columns, and within there we can insert images, we can manually put text in there, we can put whatever content we wish to put in there that we wish. But where the benefit of a text grid is it allows us to position things specifically on a page. So I'm going to cancel out of that one and go into the one I've already prepared. Just make that full screen. So in my example, it's 1 row and 2 columns. If I just right click and go into the sizing, you can see that column 1 is 14 centimeters, so that's this one here, and then column 2 is 6 centimeters. You can't see the grid lines because if I right click and go into the edit style, I've actually turned off all the grid lines, so I could turn them on if I wanted to. See, the grid lines are reappearing, but obviously today I wanted to make use of a grid but didn't need the actual grid lines. So in column number 2, I've just inserted my company logo. And then in column number 1, you can see I've got some text, which includes some blue dynamic fields. So the filter, that's going to be where it mentions the venue that we're talking about. So London in this example. So I've just inserted. And then we've got various fields that we can add. So in this example, it was inserting a survey field, and I inserted the filter. In fact, it was actually the filter value, so it just mentions the word London rather than the whole question, sort of which venue did you attend today equals London. Likewise, there's the date, so again just inserting the date of when the actual report was run. And then we have something called cell referencing here, where it says T venue R1C1. So that's actually pointing off to a table hidden away and grabbing the data from that table. So again, if I just pop back into the PDF, you can see it's actually picking out the number 31 from a particular table. So let's go and have a quick look at that table. So if I click OK and bring up my list of previously saved tables and charts. So it was called T venue. So I've got a table here which is based on that venue question. It's got all the 4 different venues in there, and you can see it's sorted top to bottom, so whichever is the most popular is always going to be at the top. Now, when we run the report will be filtered, and that will automatically filter this table. So when we run the report in just a moment, we're going to be putting filters such as venue equals 1, and you can see that's only showing me London's data and popped it to the top. If I say venue equals 2, that will pop Manchester to the top. So whatever is at the top in that position is the data that we want to insert into our header of our survey report. So if I just cancel out there. So if I single click on the top figure, you can see down the bottom R1C1, row 1, column 1 effectively, but we can simply right click, copy the cell reference, and then I've just pasted it into my grid table, my text grid. Okay, now when it comes to actually building reports, if I just head back into my PDF, when it comes to actually building your report, one of the hardest things is actually deciding how to make your report look attractive and not overwhelming. And one idea is to have different sections which are clearly labelled. So in my case, I've done this by having a sort of separator line for my different sections, and then some key text, or sort of header text. So again, if we head back into the survey, so we're looking at items number 4, 5, number 4. So you can see I have an information window. So again, just clicking on the plus to create an information window. So the first one, I've just double clicked and inserted an image. So just a very pale green line. And then I've got a separate information window underneath, which is just my section header text. I probably could have joined these into just one rather than having 2 separate ones, but the benefit of having them as 2 separate ones is that I can then clone that one and perhaps drag it down wherever I need my next line. But obviously I've done that already, so I'll just delete that one. First couple of charts on my page, so I've got that's called a donut chart and a bar chart. So if you look at the page, it looks like these are in 2 columns, so 1 column, 2 column. But if we go back and look at the report, I've actually specified that it's going to be 4 columns. And this technique is quite useful because it allows me to, if I go into the columns and go into my columns, so I've got 4 columns, but rather than being equally spread, I've basically had some sort of spacers at the side. So it just allows me to indent my charts rather than having them sort of spread out side by side. So I've got my spacer, the donut chart's going to go there, the bar chart's going to go there, and then there's going to be a spare sort of empty column at the end as well. So that's going to be the little spacer. So that's again just a information window. It's actually completely empty. I've just named it blank just so it's easy to work out what that is when we come to look at it later. We then have the donut, and then we have the bar, and then actually, so that's column 1, column 2, column 3, and actually column 4 is completely empty. Now, in terms of these charts, you can see there what we call an execution. So again, it's a case of clicking on the plus and execute, and dropping down the menu, deciding which of your tables or charts you want to bring into your report. Now, the benefit of this execution is that this produces a permanent link between the individual chart, so there's the individual chart, and this report. So if in 6 months' time I decide to go into that donut chart and perhaps change the colours or turn on the decimal places, any reports that that donut belongs to will also update. So you're kind of future-proofing your reports. The other option which you might try and do, which does work, but it might come back to haunt you, if I take that bar one, drag it across and drop that one in, what we've effectively done there is copy it and paste it. So this chart number 10 there is no longer linked to that chart at the top. So if I was to make some updates in 6 months' time, the reports will still be using the original one. So it seems quick and easy, but actually it's best to execute instead. One other option, just to ideally avoid, you have got the option to actually create some tables and charts directly in the report. But ideally we want to make use of all the tables and charts that we've already sort of previewed and been through and designed and specified exactly how we want them to appear. So I wouldn't personally create them directly. Okay, if we look at options 12, 13 and 14, that's just again another section header. So again, just a repeat of what we did for effectively number 4, 5 and 4 and 5. So that's this line here, and at the bottom I've just got another chart. So again, we've got another chart. Moving on to this middle section here. Now, I think we need to be realistic when you are producing reports that most people probably aren't going to read more than the front cover or the front page, and that's, to be honest, if you're lucky. So you might have pages 2, 3, 4 and 5, but really we need to get the key information into our report straight away. So if they don't move beyond page 1, they've at least got what information you wanted to give them. So in the middle, we've got some images and then some text. Now, again, going back into my report, we're looking at numbers 15, 16 and 17. So I've got 3 columns. Again, this is just going to allow me to have a spacer at that end and a spacer at that end and make sure that this is centralized in the middle. And I've just made use of another text grid. So again, if I go back into the columns first of all, so again, I've got the spacer on one end, my text grid with all those images are going to go in the middle, and then the spacer at the other end. And if I go into my text grid, let's make that slightly bigger. Okay, so in my example, I've got, this time if I right click and go to the sizing, I've got 3 evenly spaced columns with 3 rows of data, or 3 rows in my text grid. I've got some images at the top in row 1, I've got the question text in row 3, and then I'm making use of essentially what is, you'll see in a moment, quite an ugly looking table called T5 ratings. And again, we're grabbing that data from that table and inserting it into the text grid. So I'm just going to go and have a quick look at this table. So T5 ratings, you can see that one's looking at column number 4, the middle one is looking at column number 1, and the last one is looking at column number 3. But it's all coming from a table called T5 ratings. So there's my table. If I double click on that one. So I said, not a particularly pleasant table to look at, but no one's ever going to see this. If I go into the properties of it, it's actually using some derived variables, so V5A to V5D. So in terms of simplifying your analysis, often when you're reporting, you want to sort of introduce some derived variables. So I'm going to quickly show you what V5A, B, C and D is. So V5A is a derived variable which is based on the data coming out of question 5A, and it's just basically taking the 2 positive options, so good and very good, and giving it a category of positive, and the 2 negative, poor and very poor, as a negative. So I'm charting that data or building that into a table, but as I said, no one's actually going to see this apart from you. And then we're just cell referencing the data, so copying the cell reference, so again there R1, C1 and number 3 and 4 again, and that data has been inserted back into my text grid. Okay, now quite a big part of smart reporting is all about sort of creating these what essentially are ugly tables, and then pulling that data into your report where it can be presented in a slightly nicer format. And with regards to the images, as in these images here, it really doesn't matter too much what images you use. No one's really going to pay much attention to them, to be honest. It's just a way of drawing out these figures from all the other information on your page. But arguably, the simpler, the better in terms of which images to use. At the bottom of my page, I've then got my one final sort of text header, header text and the line. So again, that is 1 column break, got my key data, and then I've got my trend Q5, so again, just another executed chart. Moving on to page 2 of my report. To ensure that each page works as a sort of standalone sort of report on its own, because of course people might print these out and then sort of lose page 1. So you can see at the top, if I just zoom in, I've got the name of the report and when the report was run. So if we go and look at that one, so I've got my new page break, and you can see it's actually got some new headers and footers in there. So if I double click, I don't need to specify that it's going to be portrait again or the margins, because that was already set previously and nothing's changed. But in this example, what I am going to add, or what I have already added, is the text that I want to appear at the top of every page going forward. And again, you can see it's putting the dynamic inserted text in. Okay, and that will continue on each sort of page going forward. Looking at the various charts on this page, if I just zoom back out. So we got 4 charts and a cloud at bottom, so effectively 5 charts. If we go and look at those in Snap, so it's actually numbers 27, 28, 33, 34, and finally the word cloud, which is 39. Now you notice that above each of those, or most of those, there's a window size, and this will specify what proportions and dimensions that chart's going to be in. So if I double click on that window size, and just before I go any further, just to confirm that the window size only affects your charts and your clouds, because your clouds are pretty much charts anyway. But if I click on set custom, it will throw up a random chart, and it's a case of just dragging that window into a dimension or a size that you think might be suitable for your report. But as we're doing so, just to sort of highlight that it's the height which specifies how big the fonts are. Going left and right effectively just sort of squashes things up. Okay. Now, I'm just going to cancel out there a second. Now, ideally, it's ultimately a little bit of sort of trial and error in terms of what size to go for. But just to confirm, we're not saying that the chart's going to be 15 centimeters wide by 11 centimeters high. We're just saying that that's the starting dimensions of that chart. It will then be zoomed down into the available space on the page. Now, if I was to go back up to my two charts at the very beginning, so just moving back into my report, back to these two where, remember, we had effectively 4 columns, but basically column 2 and column 3. So that was the donut and the bar. So you can see they've both got slightly different window sizes on, in fact quite different window sizes, just because they are being squashed into different areas. But the aim is that we're trying to make sure that regardless of whether a chart's going across the whole page or squashed into 3 columns or 2 columns, that you can still read the text and the font is comparable across all the different charts on the page. As I said, it is a little bit of trial and error. My advice is when you are choosing on your window sizes, when you double click on one, don't edit them both at the same time. Just basically tweak one, run it and see how that's looking, maybe tweak it a bit more rather than sort of getting completely lost of where you started from. And normally when I'm running a report for the very first time, my first window size that I'd normally set it to is 26 by 11. I'd run the report once and then decide if we need to start tweaking some of those window sizes. Okay. Just to finish off, my final page has the general comments. And going back into my report, so we've got L9, so again page break first of all, then a sort of section header, and then L9. And a handy little hint, if I go and look at L9, you can see we've got bullet points on our list, which is quite useful when you're trying to sort of look between different comments. If I go into the properties of that list, so Q9 is the actual comment question, but I've forced a bullet point in there. Now, a bullet point isn't particularly easy to find on your keyboard, so on your computer you will have something called character map. So if you just do a search of character map, and if you then do a search of bullet, you can then grab the bullet icon, copy it, and then you can just paste it into here. And what I've done is, I said, you can see that I've put the bullet point in speech marks. I've added a couple of extra sort of spaces and then used the with to effectively join it to the data from question 9. So with effectively sellotapes that to that. There's also a filter on there. I'll just cut that out in a second. If I don't have the filter, then you can see it will put every single person on there, even if they didn't answer question number 9. So okay, so as you can see, your report is made up of table and chart executions, interspersed with the occasional page setup. and then potentially some text grids, which we'll use to pull out that key information, as I said, potentially pointing off to sort of a table hiding in the background. And also just remembering any time that you've got charts that you will also want to include a window size. Now, just to finish off, to briefly discuss what's going on at the top. So at the top you can see we've got context and filter. Now, this is heading more into the territory of part 2 of this webinar, which we'll be doing in the new year. But just briefly, adding the venue into the context, so remember that's that question with the 4 different answers in there, that will ensure that this report runs 4 times. So obviously if you had 24 venues, the report would run 24 times. The filter then says make sure that for every time the report runs, the data is filtered based on whatever the context is. So when it runs for number 1, which I think was London, make sure the data is number 1. So if we didn't have the filter in there, we would still get 4 reports, but we'd get 4 reports which were all exactly the same, and it would involve the data for every single person regardless of where they stayed or which venue they went to. So it's a combination of the two which run 4 reports and make sure the data is run accordingly. Now at the moment, if I was to run the report, I will get one giant PDF, which is sometimes quite useful when you're previewing the report, because you can just literally scroll through. I'm looking at Manchester, so it's quite useful to just look at all the reports all at once. Ultimately though, you want to produce probably 4 separate PDFs. So I'm going to go into the very first page setup, page layout, and we can add a new document break. Even better, in the PDF, and say venue report 4, and again we want to ideally dynamically name this. So I'm going to name it based on the variable. Going to make use of that venue question, and it's whatever the current context is. So when it runs for Bristol, it will say Bristol. When it runs for London, it will say London. If I now press the play button, and I think I'm already pointing off to a PDF creator. Yeah, I press play. You can see it's producing 1 report for London. If I save that to my desktop, it's then going to produce another report for Manchester, etc., etc. So I won't go through and run them all now. Okay, and if I were to look at my desktop, you can see it's produced the PDFs and it's obviously named them accordingly. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a good introduction to building reports within SnapXMP and putting together your saved tables and charts, adding some cell referencing alongside images to draw attention to your key information. As I mentioned, this was the first of 2 webinars relating to reporting. In the new year, we're going to be looking at then making your reports more dynamic in terms of the actual content. On screen now, there are a few QR codes which will take you off to some of our previous webinars. So we've got one based around the actual building of the tables and charts in the first place. The one in the middle will take you off to quite a few pages on our support hub based around reporting. And then if you have got 2 minutes, I'd be grateful if you wouldn't mind taking a few moments to fill in our survey, which you can scan the QR code on the right. And yeah, let us know what you thought of today's webinar. Thank you for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.